My name is Miss B, and today we'll be looking at oil pastels. I'll take you through some basic oil pastel techniques, and together we'll create a beautiful oil pastel flower. So if you're ready to get started, make sure to shoot me a thumbs up and let's get into it. For today's activities, you'll need a clean and flat workspace, 2 sheets of dark colored paper, here I have black cardstock, a ruler, a pencil, and an eraser, and last but not least, a variety of colors in oil pastel. Now that we have all the materials we need, we can get started on our first activity, experimenting with some basic oil pastel techniques. To set up for practicing these techniques, I have divided my first black paper into 6 squares by drawing 2 lines down and 1 line across my paper with a ruler and a pencil. The first technique we'll look at is called scrumbling. This is typically how you initially apply oil pastel to create the base layer of color. Scrumbling is achieved by scribbling in a circular motion with the oil pastel with a light to medium pressure. You will notice that while I work with the oil pastel, I keep my hand elevated rather than dragging across the paper to control the pressure I use and so I don't smudge the oil pastel. The next technique is blending. Here I have blended a dark green into a light green and then into a yellow. To blend oil pastels, you create a base layer with scrumbling and then layer the next color on top. You will notice that I go back and forth between the colors I am blending where they meet to fully merge the colors together. In our third box, we will look at adding highlights. Adding highlights, or highlighting oil pastels, is achieved by blending any color of oil pastel with white. In oil pastels, white has a unique quality that when blended with other colors makes them more opaque and vibrant. White can be blended on top of any base color, or can act as a base layer on top of which you can add any color. I recommend you try both. The next technique we will look at is shading. Shading is achieved by blending any color with a darker color, such as black, dark blue, or brown. I have started using black in my example, however black is a dominant color, meaning it is difficult to change or overcome. For this reason, in practice, I typically use a dark blue or brown for shadows, because they are easier to blend and manipulate as you work. The last oil pastel technique that we will look at is my favorite. This technique is called impasto. Impasto is an Italian term that refers to the medium sticking up from the surface of the painting. To achieve an impasto finish on your oil pastel, you can use a heavy pressure while applying the oil pastel to dig it into the surface and then lift away to create a thick line. You should only use this technique at the end of your painting process, because once it is applied, it is difficult to alter. Adding impasto strokes to your painting gives it a 3-dimensionality and sparkle. The last box left on your sheet, I recommend playing with different pressures as you apply your oil pastel. Here I have started off with a light pressure and gradually increased the pressure. You will notice that it's easier to control with a light pressure and you get better coverage and color with a heavy pressure. You can create the same coverage and bright color as you have with the heavy pressure by layering your oil pastel, allowing you to have the best of both pressures. With these techniques in your tool belt, you are now ready to start creating your very own oil pastel flower painting. Before we can start painting, we need to have a plan. The first step in making our plan is finding a reference photo. Here I have chosen a photo that I took of a yellow tiger lily. Next, I've created a frame of reference by adding a 4x4 grid on top of my image to examine the size of the image and the position of the forms. As a last step in this plan, I have outlined the major forms that are essential for this image to be recognized as a flower in black. Now that we have a plan, we can start to create our underdrawing. I started off my underdrawing by framing where the drawing will go on my paper. The reference photo is in a portrait format, so I have created a portrait frame for my flower on my paper. At this point, you may want to draw a grid to help guide your underdrawing. I find that adding a grid at the start causes me to overthink my underdrawing, so I start by sketching out the essential forms where they are roughly and adding the grid at the end to verify that my forms are in the right spots. I recommend following the drawing process that works best for you. I always do my underdrawings in pencil so that I can erase the lines that I don't like and so that the underdrawing is not visible through the oil pastel at the end. Now that our underdrawing is done, we are ready to start painting. You will want to start off your painting by color blocking. This means filling in the shapes you have outlined in your underdrawing with the major colors that you see. Working from my reference photo, the first colors that I saw were yellow and white, so I started with those colors and gradually worked around my painting to fill in the other colors I saw, like green, gray, and brown. Important to note, at this point you only want to create the base layer of colors, so you'll want to use a light pressure and scrumbling technique to fill in the major shapes. We now have a great foundation to build up our painting. Next, we will want to start blending in variations of colors, as well as adding highlights and shadows by building up from the base layer we created. In the next layers, I work on making smoother transitions between the colors of the foundation by blending these colors together. I also add colors like orange to create the illusion of depth in my flower, and add layers of white, black, and blue to create highlights and shadows, like we practiced in our techniques. At this point, I start to build up the background of my flower using the scrumbling technique. Because I don't want the background to be the focus of the painting, I leave it abstract and unresolved. Once we are happy with our colors, transitions, and forms, we can move on to our final touches. For the final touches on my painting, I've added some impasto strokes on the flower petals to make them sparkle, and some small details like the brown dots on the flower petals and the stamen. I've also gone back into the leaves to smooth out some of the blending and fix up my shapes. Finally, I added detail into the stump below the flower and some colors to the background to create balance and unity in my painting. And like that, we have finished our oil pastel flower painting. I hope you've enjoyed this video workshop and that it has inspired you to try oil pastels in your own artwork. If you have followed through this workshop, I would love to see your paintings in the comments below. Thank you for watching!